Good afternoon. It's Sunday the 16th of January 2022 and Randy and I are sat on the Kathleen and May, which is a ship built in 1900, so it's over 120 years old. It's a three-masted brig, so it was a cargo boat, trading boat, West Country trading boat. Alongside is Josephine, which is our project, and if you've seen 1 and 2 of Restoring Josephine, then you're up to date with where we're at. We haven't done an awful lot since then, but we'll be updating you on the work that we're doing over the next 6 months when we hope to have finished the restoration of Josephine. So that's not what this episode is about. What we want to do now is to go back to the beginning when we bought Josephine and fill in the backstory and also the work that we've done on her, because we've done a lot of work on her before we came to Nielsen's, which is the work that's in episode 1 and 2 of Restoring Josephine. So we're now going to go back to the beginning when we bought the boat, and we're going to tell you how we actually got into this mess, because it is a mess in many respects. It's a mess in the sense that buying the boat nearly bankrupted us, more or less did really. We had to come out of retirement and go back to work. In fact, we signed on for social benefits to begin with for a couple of weeks while we found work. I found work working for a company called Greenfields, which was installing and maintaining children's playgrounds. So basically I went back to digging holes. That was the job. That's the job I did. Randy, so it was a mess in that sense. It's a mess in the sense that after 45 years living together, Randy and I had to separate. Randy went back to Copenhagen for 4 years so that she could work in her expertise, which is in the care industry. And the reason she went back to Denmark is because she could earn 3 or 4 times what she could in the UK for doing the same job, and we needed the money desperately to rescue this Josephine, the project. So we actually separated for 4 years. We saw each other on holidays and things, maybe 2 or 3 times a year, and that was it. So it was a mess in that sense, and it was a mess in the sense that we actually nearly lost Josephine. And in some sense we may still. We're confident that we can afford to finish the project, partly because we've got such marvellous shipwrights working with us who are letting us do a lot of the work, as you will have seen in the other episodes. But although we're confident of getting the project finished, we're not confident of having any money left over to go and sail her, which is why we bought her. So we could yet, our dreams could yet still be a nightmare that we're trying to work our way out of. But we're going to go back and tell you that story, but not in this episode that we are publishing now. The reason we're sat here now is we're taking this opportunity to give a little bit of the backstory. We know from watching other channels, we, for instance, are always interested in the people behind the story. What do they bring to the table? What is it that allows them to do what they're doing? Like this, for instance, a restoring project like this, the 2 main assets are experience and funding. And so we thought we'd just make it clear that we have neither of those. Neither money nor experience, and so what we're going to do is just delve a little bit very quickly into our past, so that you know where we're coming from, if you like, and it might also explain how we managed to get ourselves into this mess in the first place, why we bought Josephine, why we thought we could do what we want to do. So my past, pretty straightforward. I was born in North England, Southport. My family come from Barrow-in-Furness, and most of my family worked for Vickers, which was a big shipyard in Barrow-in-Furness. We lived in a Vickers-built house and went to a Vickers-built school. It was that sort of a place. My father became an engineer in the Merchant Navy, and then an engineer with the Central Electricity Generating Board in the UK, and got the opportunity to go to Africa, West Africa, Ghana, to help build their national electricity system. Going to Africa was absolutely fantastic. That happened in the late 50s, so my formative years were growing up with my 2 brothers in Ghana, and we spent all the weekends on the beach, which is absolutely brilliant. And I suppose that was my first experience of loving and respecting the ocean, I suppose, because there were big seas out there. The The Africans used their canoes to go trawling for hammerhead sharks, so it was quite exotic in many ways. So yeah, that was my first experience. But for those of you that believe in fate, it was then that really Randy's and my lifelines began to converge, even though obviously we'd never met each other, and weren't going to meet each other for another 20 years. But my family became very good friends with the Danish family in Denmark, and that was cemented when when we returned from Africa in the mid-60s. My mother brought me and my brothers back on a ship, and my father crossed the Sahara Desert in a Land Rover with his friend Bent, who was the father of the Danish family. And the significance of that is that when I finished my secondary education, I should say, here in actually Bristol, and I didn't know what I wanted to do, I thought I'd go off travelling around the world to get some inspiration. And in those days, hitchhiking was the way to travel. Remember, this was before the internet, before mobile phones. You couldn't Google it. You had to go and actually see it physically if you wanted to see anything of the world. And hitchhiking was quite common in those days. So I thought, well, okay, where would be my first place? I'll go to Copenhagen because I know a Danish family living there, and that's really how I met Randy. Randy's experience a little bit different from mine.
Well, I was born in Sweden. My mother was Swedish and my father Danish, and we ended up moving to Denmark, where I grew up just outside Copenhagen. And I spent a lot of all my summer holidays while I was at school, where my grandmother had a house very close to the sea, and I spent
the Baltic Sea.
Yeah, Baltic Sea, yeah. And I spent a lot of time fishing with my uncles and aunties there. But apart from that, I don't really know much about sailing.
No, messing about in small boats, which is pretty much all I ever did. So we're back in Denmark. I met Randy there, and in fact that put an end to my worldly travels, because I loved it so much in Copenhagen. I just stayed there. I got a job, which is where I met Randy, and we lived together in Randy's apartment. First we got an apartment together, and we lived there for a couple of years. During that time I got interested in the philosophical side of law. After a while I decided I'd quite like to go to university to study law. So Randy and I moved back to the UK, and I went to university in London, the LSE, and studied law. Loved it, and I became a lawyer. I didn't really set out to become a lawyer, but it just seemed the natural thing to do once I had a law degree. And so I became a lawyer, and I was a criminal defence lawyer back in Bristol, actually, for a firm in Bristol. And I loved that work too, but I became disillusioned with the whole criminal system in a way, because I realised that I was representing the same people for the same offences, and it was a sort of merry-go-round. So I then joined a firm in London and became a civil litigation lawyer. I loved that too. It was great fun. We had a lot of fun, but I had started flying for a hobby. Microlights. I started flying microlights as a hobby, and I had my own microlight. And one day I realised that I was more often at the flying field than the office. I thought, this is ridiculous. So I gave up my job as a lawyer. I retired effectively, unfortunately, before I could really profit from it.
Yeah. Well,
so
just as well we didn't get trapped in that, because I'm not sure you would have got me out of it at that time.
No, that's true. So I gave it up overnight and did a course to become a flying instructor. Set up a business with my partner, who had been my flying instructor, and we had a nice little business. But that was in the southeast of England, and the southeast of England is jealously guarded by, or it was at that time anyway, by property developers, and they effectively bullied us out of business, really, because we couldn't develop at all. You know, whenever we tried to get planning permission for a little airfield somewhere, they always had an influence in that, and backhanders and all the rest of it. It just became impossible. So fortuitously at that time I went on a flying holiday with my local flying club to France, and it was a revelation, because they had a totally different attitude, and they welcomed us with open arms. And I realised that you know, I could really do quite well running a flying school in France. So I went to France, and so I didn't tread on the toes of any of the local schools. What I did was I taught British people, but I taught them in France. So British people came over to France, and that meant that we had to look after them. So we ended up buying this enormous pile of a house. It was absolutely beautiful. It was the local, had been the hunting lodge to the local chateau in Le Lud. By the way, we were in the Loire area of France. And we bought this massive property, not obviously for our own personal needs, although we lived in it obviously, but for so we could run it as a guest house effectively, and that was Randy's job.
So yeah, I wasn't really involved in the flying apart from being a passenger from time to time, you know. But yeah, so I used to look after the guests, and they were all British people, weren't they? Mm-hmm. And they'd come with wives or girlfriends or family and stay with us, and I had my hands full with looking after the animals.
Oh yeah, we became a bit of a zoo after a while. Yeah. Because the property was so big, it had 25 acres of woodland and a couple of fields, and we've always been animal lovers, and but we ended up with a flock of sheep because we had so much grassland that we were spending too much time cutting it in and around the house anyway. So we thought we'd get some sheep. Nothing about sheep, but we quickly learned, if you like. We ended up with about 40 sheep at the end of the day, by the time we left there anyway. But anyway, we'd rescue other animals because we had the space and loved them. We had stables and things that we could house them in. So people started coming to us with waif and strays, if you like, and we ended up with goats, ponies, you know, you name it. It's all very good fun in France anyway.
Cats and dogs.
Cats, dogs, yeah. But unfortunately, in 2008, as all of you will be aware, financial crisis, the banking crisis came, and it just literally swept everything away. We lost everything. Overnight, we went from a thriving business to no business at all, because of course, you know, learning to fly was not a priority during that period for anybody. So then we had to decide what to do. We didn't have, you know, funds to stay in France without working, so we sold up and we returned to the UK once more, where we bought a narrowboat whilst we decided what we wanted to do with our lives. So the reason we bought a narrowboat is because it's something we'd wanted to do back in the 1980s, but couldn't because of my profession as a lawyer. It didn't sort of fit into the picture, if you like. It was too difficult to manage. And now we had the opportunity. We'd sold the house so we could buy the narrowboat, and moved onto the narrowboat, and we spent a couple of years, 2 or 3 years, cruising around the network. After a while, it became a bit claustrophobic. We needed more stimulation, and unfortunately also the management of the waterways, which was British Waterways, who restyled themselves as the Canal and River Trust. It's a long story which I won't bore you with, but effectively what they do is try to micromanage the lives of people with boats or living on the waterways, and it became tedious. The whole idea of buying the boat and living on the waterways was to get away from all of that, and actually it was far worse on the waterways than it was on living on land, you know, in the normal life. You know, you were under a microscope and everything you did was sort of watched and measured, and so Randy suggested that we buy a boat and go offshore. So we started looking around at boats, and we were very interested in old working boats, and I went on a charter with a boat called Irene, 120-foot trading ketch, West Country trading ketch. It's a beautiful boat, and I did a 3-week charter in the Irish Sea, but that really cemented our resolve and determination to buy our own boat. And that's when we started looking and found Josephine. And that's the story we're going to tell next. So this episode was really just to show a little bit of our background, so you know where we're coming from. You know, if we manage to get out of this, it won't be because we've got lots of funds, and it certainly won't be because we've got a lot of experience. In fact, we really wanted to do this because we don't have the experience. You know, we want the stimulation, we want the experience and the adventure. I think if we'd had a lifetime of already doing it, we probably wouldn't want to do it. So, but we certainly got more than we bargained for. That's for certain. Now, whether we recover from it, we really don't know. By the time we've finished telling you the story of buying Josephine and how our dreams turned into a nightmare, and how we set about trying to recover from it, by that time we should be, well into finishing the project, and we'll be able to then present you, our experience in doing that. So I hope you follow us through, and hopefully, if it does go well, and we still have any money left at the end of it, which is doubtful, but if we do, we will continue to tell the story as we venture off and learn to manage the boat and sail around the world, wherever the wind takes us. So anyway, that's it for now. Hope you enjoyed that, and we'll catch you in the next episode. Thanks for watching.